let's dive right in. When you look at the massive, incredibly complex world of Indian politics, there's one thing you realize pretty fast. Identity is everything. I mean, it's the engine, it's the language, and it's absolutely the battlefield of the world's largest democracy.
You know, a great way to think about Indian society is to picture it as a prism. So when the light of politics shines through it, it doesn't just come out as one single beam. Nope, it refracts, breaking into this whole spectrum of identities: religion, caste, and ethnicity. Each of those colors is a powerful force that really shapes how people vote, who they follow, and ultimately how the entire nation is run.
And that really gets us to the heart of what we're exploring today. In a democracy with 1.4 billion people, do these ancient, deeply rooted identities end up strengthening the nation by giving everyone a voice? Or do they risk fracturing it along these old, deep fault lines? That's the big question.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to dig into this idea of India's identity prism. Then we'll break down the three big ones: religion, caste, and ethnicity. And finally, we'll see how all of this comes together in the very delicate balancing act that is Indian democracy.
So what makes this prism so incredibly powerful? Well, a ton of research, including from economists like Abhijit Banerjee and Thomas Piketty, has shown something fascinating. For decades, Indian voters have consistently been driven more by these community or sectarian interests than by, say, purely economic ones. And that's a fundamental difference from how many Western democracies operate.
The political scientist Christophe Jaffrelot has this perfect way of putting it. He calls caste the mosaic of Indian politics. And that's such a great image, right? Each piece of the mosaic is distinct, and you simply can't understand the big picture without seeing how all those individual pieces fit together. And honestly, the same could be said for religion and ethnicity. All right, let's start with the first major facet of this prism: religion. Now, its role in politics is nothing new. It was actually institutionalized way back during British rule, and it has evolved dramatically ever since.
Just look at the journey this timeline lays out. We start way back in 1909, with reforms that literally created separate voting blocks based on religion. After independence, you see the era of Nehruvian secularism, which was a state policy of trying to keep religion out of politics. But then you hit these flashpoints, like the Shah Bano case in 1985, which started a huge shift. And that all culminated in the 1990s with the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, which dragged religious identity right to the center of the political stage, where it's pretty much stayed ever since.
Now, central to this modern era is this concept of Hindutva. And it's so crucial to understand this isn't just about religious faith. It is a political ideology, one that sees Hindu cultural and national identity as the core, predominant fabric of India itself. And this slide really shows a key strategic split. For years, as you see on the left, the Congress Party tried this balancing act, often called dual appeasement, trying to appeal to various religious groups at the same time. The BJP, on the other hand, adopted a strategy of hard Hindutva, which you see on the right. This was a much more direct approach, mobilizing voters primarily around a very potent Hindu nationalist platform.
So what's the potential consequence of this shift? Well, as the political scientist Zoya Hassan warns, India may be moving away from an inclusive, liberal democracy towards what she calls an ethnic majoritarian democracy. That's a system where the rights and culture of the majority group can start to take precedence. And that really gets to the heart of the fracture side of our big question.
Okay, let's pivot to the second major piece of this identity mosaic: caste. This is a uniquely Indian social hierarchy, and it has become one of the most powerful tools for political mobilization you'll find anywhere.
I mean, to really get the power of caste, you just have to look at the numbers. The other backward classes, or OBCs, make up an estimated 42% of the entire population. A bloc that massive makes them, as the political scientist Satish Deshpande says, strategically unavoidable for any political party that seriously wants to win an election.
You know, decades ago, Rajni Kothari made this groundbreaking argument. He said that democracy in India didn't get rid of caste. Instead, caste became the very language, the very structure through which democracy started to work. It became the main way to mobilize the masses. So from this point of view, democracy actually strengthens these identities by giving them a political voice they never had before.
And this mobilization really happened in two great waves, or democratic upsurges, as Yogendra Yadav calls them. The first hit in the 1960s, when OBCs started gaining real power through new regional parties. But the second upsurge, the more explosive one, was in the 1990s. That's when the Mundal Commission's recommendations for job reservations for OBCs were put into place,
which just cemented the power of caste-based politics for a whole generation. And this brings us right up to today, with the huge debate you see here, the demand for a national caste census. On the for side, supporters say it's all about social justice, using the slogan Jitni Abadi Utna Hak, which means rights proportional to population. But on the against side, opponents worry it could just harden these caste identities and, as the critic Pratap Bandametta cleverly puts it, be snake oil that distracts everyone from the real deeper issues.
Okay, our third lens is ethnicity, which in India is a complex mix of language, tribe, and region. In a country that is truly a nation of many, many nations, these different identities are in a constant state of competition for political space and for resources.
So what really drives these ethnic movements? Well, it can be a reaction against state policies that feel like they're trying to impose one single culture, like the anti-Hindi movements you saw in the South. It can be a feeling of alienation, especially when big development projects displace tribal communities. And sometimes, it's a direct demand for more autonomy, or even for separate states. All fueled by these conflicting ideas about who's truly indigenous to a region and who gets to control its resources. And look, this isn't just some abstract, academic concept. The recent and absolutely tragic ethnic violence in the state of Manipur is a stark, heartbreaking, real-world example. It's a conflict that is rooted in competing claims over land, resources, and political power between different ethnic communities. It is a terrible reminder of just how fragile that social fabric can be when these identity-based fault lines are put under extreme pressure.
Pratap Bandametta gives us a really powerful way to understand conflicts like the one in Manipur. He argues that when the distribution of resources, whether it's land rights or job reservations, is seen as a zero-sum game, meaning a gain for one group is seen as a direct loss for another, then violence becomes a very likely outcome. So how do all these powerful identities, religion, caste, and ethnicity, all interact in today's Indian democracy? Well, the strategies political parties use are getting more and more complex.
Political scientists have spotted these evolving strategies. Yogendra Yadav talks about identity plus. That's where parties take their core identity appeal and add on these broader promises of development and welfare. And in a similar vein, Suhas Pelshikar describes the BJP's very successful Hindutva Plus model. This approach blends Hindu nationalism with a strong focus on welfare, creating a whole new identity for voters as labhartis, or beneficiaries of government programs.
But we have to remember, the path of identity-based politics is filled with risks. Just a quick look at India's neighbors offers some serious cautionary tales. Think about the dominance of Sunni Muslim nationalism in Pakistan, or the Sinhalese supremacism that led to a brutal civil war in Sri Lanka, or the devastating ethnic conflicts that have plagued Myanmar. These examples really highlight the dangers of unchecked majorityism. It's the ultimate version of that fracturing scenario we talked about, which brings us right back to where we started, that Indian prism. It refracts politics into a dazzling but sometimes dangerous spectrum of identities. The great challenge, the question that hangs over everything, remains this: can a nation of 1 billion-plus people, each with their own powerful identity, manage to forge a unified future without fracturing its democratic soul? The answer to that is going to define India for the rest of the 21st century.